Okay, good morning, Shalom Aleichem. Parshas Vayigash, Tuf Shin Pei Dalid. 5 to go. It is also Erev Asar B'Teves, as we will discuss a little bit today about the unique nature of the fast day of Asar B'Teves. We are right now in the middle and hopefully closing this loop on this tremendous drama, probably the most dramatic story in all of Tanakh, maybe in all of Jewish history. You can't make it up. The drama unfolding about Yosef and the brothers, ultimately concluding with Yosef unable to hold it in anymore. This is like the biggest secret that nobody knows except for him. Maybe there are hints along the way that he's been dropping to his children. One of them has been an interpreter for him. Maybe Paro knows a little bit about what's going on, but not really. And the brothers seem to be very clueless in terms of who this person is. You could tell in the way that Yehuda speaking very, very, pleading on behalf of him, Binyamin, his elderly father, Nebuch, that this is dire, this is serious, and we're really asking you for a favor, right? We know your rules, and we don't want you to break your rules, God forbid, you bureaucrat, but we need a favor because we have an elderly father at home. This is going to be bad. I've taken responsibility for this child. I've taken responsibility for this child. And if this doesn't happen, I will stay here, or something else worse will happen. Please, please, please allow us to bring Binyamin, baby brother, back home. At that point, Yosef can no longer hold back his emotions. V'lo yachol Yosef lisapak. He can't hold back any of his emotions at this point. He tells all of the non-essential, non-relatives to leave the room. Right? All the servants, all the Egyptians, you get out of here. Vayiten es kolo bivchi. He starts to cry. Right? He can't even say it. He can't get the words out, and he just begins to cry. Vayishma'u Mitzrayim, vayishma beis para. Did they literally hear? They heard him screaming. They heard him crying. Vayomer Yosef elachav. Yosef then looks at his brothers and says, Ani Yosef ha'od avichai. I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? V'lo yachlu achav la'nososo. His brothers could not respond to him. Last year we discussed what this meant. Kiniv halumi panav. What does it mean, kiniv halumi panav? They couldn't respond because what? They were afraid, possibly.
Shocked, guilty, afraid.
Right, shocked, guilty, afraid, embarrassment. These are all languages you see in the Rishonim, and they're similar, they're overlapping emotions, but they're very different types of emotions. And what were they afraid of? What was the concern here would relate to the emotion that they are happening? Was it a fear of revenge? So that's fear. Was it just that, like, oh my gosh, this was happening the whole time and we didn't know? That is maybe embarrassment. There is it could be all of the above, right? As humans, as people, it's not black and white when it comes to our emotions. It very likely is, very often, we experience overlapping emotion at the same time. And what they were experiencing elicited zero response. They could not say a word. Yeah.
I think we learned the other week before that when the brothers came down, they all went to different gates. They were looking for Yosef. So this had to write this, am I correct?
You're correct. They were looking for Yosef. They're hoping.
So just imagine that.
Yeah.
They're looking for him, right? They can't find him, but he's right under their nose.
Yeah.
The whole time. And when you do that, it has to be it's like something's hitting you right in the face when that time happens. Because when you're looking for something your whole life, and then it was right in front of you, and you didn't even see it.
Right, you didn't even see it. Yeah.
And then when it hits you, it's
Yeah. And this story definitely went on. We're reading it in 2 weeks' time, but it goes on for a few years. This is, Yaakov is holding back. Shimon's left in jail because he doesn't want to run that risk of having Binyamin go down. Then Yosef gives probably one of the most eloquent, powerful speeches. Bata al te'atzvu. Sorry, then he continues and he says the following. Vayomer Yosef elachav geshuna elai vayigash. Come closer to me. Again, the language of vayigash comes up a few times in the parsha. That shoresh vayigash. Vayigash, it begins vayigash elav Yehuda over here. And at the end, the Jewish people eventually settle in a city. What's that city called? Goshen. Funny language. Gimel Shin. Gimel Shin comes up a lot. I once heard from one of my Rabbeim, Rabbi David Miller, who is a Rosh Yeshiva in Brus, in Wise Kol in Israel. And I think we had a Shabbaton, because he wasn't there for Shabbos often. And it's probably Parshat Vayigash. And he said this language of Gimel Shin, whenever it's used in the Torah, what it means is it's connecting two things that don't necessarily belong together. They don't belong together. Like the language of walking into Shmon Esrei is an expression, the Rama says, of Vayigash. Because we are human, Hashem is divine, and the fact that we have this ability to talk directly to Hashem, and halacha treats it like Hashem is right there. Someone can't walk in front of somebody that is Tavi Shmon Esrei because it's like Hashem is right there. That's whoa. So Vayigash elav Yehuda and Yosef are very different personalities on a meta level. Yehuda's the different types of leaders, different types of ways to do things. Yosef is now second in command of Mitzrayim. Yehuda is like at this point, the base medrash guy, and they are Vayigash together. Goshen is a city. What does that mean? That's connecting the Jewish people to Mitzrayim. Those two things are oil and water. They don't belong together. So what do you have? You have a city called Goshen, which is able to connect two things that don't belong. Okay, 1 second. Maybe many of you. One last one. What is something called that connects two cities together in Hebrew? A bridge is a gesher, tzar, me'od, a gesher. A gesher, same idea. On land, right? You can't connect these two things. What do? Oh, there's water, body of water in between. Thank you. I don't know when the first bridge was created, but you have a gesher. You have a gesher, the same idea. It connects two things that physically don't belong together. Yeah.
Gimel Shin values 303 that either way, upwards or backwards. It always goes together.
Okay, write it down in your sefer, Mendy. Write it down. Okay. Then Yosef says, Vayomer Yosef, come closer to me, come closer. Rashi says maybe he showed them his bris milah as like a demarcation, a sign that he actually was Yosef, because apparently the Egyptians did not circumcise their males. Vayomer ani Yosef achichem, asher mechartem osi mitzrayma. Wait, what? One second, David. We just said Yosef just said ani Yosef orevichai. Now he says again, ani Yosef, your brother that you sold in Egypt. What? Did they not hear? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask. They store nice brothers, so they throws it. Who's being sold?
Asher machartem osi. So it sounds like a little bit of a slap in the face. I thought Yosef was trying to be nice over here. So does he need to really remind them of this right now? It's pretty obvious. He sees it on their face that they are very shocked as to what just is transpiring. And like in their minds, they're recounting probably every scene of the last few years that happened. Plus, wait, fill in the gap here for us. Like what happened? This is 22 years. And now right now, Hashem Achartem Osi, what's going on here with Yosef? Why is he saying this? And it's, at the very least, it's repetitive. At the worst, it's a little bit of a jab. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So says the Panim Yafos. Ani Yosef Achechem. Af shekvar amar lahem ani Yosef. You already said I'm Yosef. No. The first time he said I'm Yosef, your biological brother. That's me. I'll show you. And he gives it and he shows them his son. But then he wants to say to them, I'm still the same Yosef. I'm still the same Joe that you sold to slavery. I didn't change religiously. My identity as a Jew, as a son of Yaakov Avinu, did not change one iota. So what he was saying now is, number one, I am Yosef. But don't think I'm not on your team. Don't think I didn't, I left the fold now that I was in Mitzrayim for so long, which would be, I guess, excusable. He was away from his whole family for 22 years. Maybe that's why he's called Yosef HaTzadik, because being away and rejected from the entire family for 22 years, nonetheless, he stays in his Omed B'tzikaso. So what he's saying now is not, the Panim Yafo says, David, this is your question, that don't be, Asher Macharta Mosi, when I was sold, that Yosef, I'm the same guy. What? Okay.
Rabbi,
But he wasn't, he says that.
That's not a peacemaking statement.
It's not a peacemaking statement. He is stating that himself, She'omed Adayin B'Kedushaso Asher Haya B'Eretz Yisrael B'Shas Mechilaso. I am the same guy. He's not focusing on the same annoying brother that drove you nuts,
Exactly. You hated me then. You hate me now.
Chased you with all of my visions and my dreams about my future. No. He's saying I'm still the same guy. I'm still the same Joe that is from religious and on the path. That's what he is. Yeah.
I didn't know what the cause of any other cross. So maybe that was what I got in the car. Maybe they did something else, another brother missing one, which one.
Yeah. So the Rabbeinu Bachya, sorry, not the Rabbeinu Bachya, the Sforno writes a different reason. Again, I personally think that Yosef would be justified if he does say something like this in a backhanded way. It wouldn't be wrong. We're holding Yosef to too high of a pedestal. Is it so bad if Yosef says, I am Yosef who you sold to Mizraim? I don't think that would be so bad. If that's the worst that he does, Dayenu. What? Right, we're gonna talk about that soon. Yeah, about Yosef's speech and how Yosef perceives what has transpired to him. He's very, very clear. The Sforno says he actually said this to prove again that he's actually Yosef. Why? Nobody knows that he was sold. Who knows that he was sold? Them and the person that they sold him to. That was it. And that person's not Egyptian because he went from hand to hand to hand until he ended up in Egypt. So the fact, with me saying that you sold me, you know for sure that I am Yosef. Nobody else knows that you sold me and that we're brothers. The fact that I'm saying this to you further proves, and this is unclear, but the Sforno writes that when you sold me to slavery, you didn't say I'm a brother. That would be embarrassing. You just sold me to slavery. So nobody knew except for the 10 people there. That's it. No one else in history. So this further proves the idea it's not a chip. If it was, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. Okay. Yossi then goes on, and it's very, very powerful. Like don't be sad, don't get angry, because what easily can happen right now is you're all going to play, 20 questions in your head, and you're all going to question what happened and yell at each other, and I can't believe you'd figure it out. And you should know, Ki lemechya shlachani aleichem elokim lifneichem. Hashem sent me here. Hashem sent me here. And it's interesting language that he uses. Ki lemechya shachani elokim lifneichem. There are two names for Hashem that we use, generally, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei and Elokim. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei represents the Midas Hadin, and, the Midas Rachamim, the side of God that's more compassionate, and Elokim is a side of God that is more judgment, strict justice. And what's fascinating is that when Yaakov and Yosef finally meet up, and we'll analyze that inside, but what does Chazal say? What were they doing? Yosef was crying and Yaakov was saying Shema. In Shema, what do we say? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Shema Yisrael, focus not on on just Hashem's name. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, who is also Elokeinu, strict justice. Hashem Echad. I'm able to see right now a bigger picture. I'm able to see right now that what is very, very difficult, a very, very difficult time period in my life, right? 22 years, Yaakov lived to 147. So you'll do the math, but that's like more than a seventh of his life. That's a lot of time. It took years off of his life. He didn't have nevuah for all those years because he couldn't reach a level of simcha in his life to have nevuah. At that moment, Yaakov himself is saying, the Elokeinu is also the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's what Yosef is saying here. Hashem, the strict justice, sent me down here, but you should know that I'm here to save your life. I'm here to protect all of you. And subsequently, he's not focusing on this, but he is the second in command in Mitzrayim. Economically, he is saving a lot of lives being in this position right now, right? Over and over again, you would have thought that at this point, everything's coming full circle. He should have used the language Yud Kei Vav Kei. He doesn't. 3 times at least. V'yeshacheni Elokim lefnechem. And then Vatam lo atem shalachtem osi. You didn't send me here. Who sent me here? Hashem, Elokim. Elokim, ki Elokim. V'yismeni lav l'paro. We see this story with Yosef, and Rabbi Foreman points this out. I heard this from him directly, that we could look at the story of Yosef in like three ways. We could either be Yosef in the story, be Yosef, the brothers, Yaakov, or Hashem, the bird's eye view. And we see it like Hashem, because we see the story as it's over. It's over already. And that's our perspective in this story. And that's great because we're able to see how the whole story comes to fruition, and there's a bigger picture here in everything. In our lives, things don't work that way, right? We see everything in a vacuum in what's happening right now. It's very hard to see the long road ahead because we don't know what it means. Therefore, it's very difficult to have the emunah, the bitachon, that things are going to work out, or this is the way that Hashem wants them to be for whatever reason. It's very hard to have that. Yosef had that vision, and that was like his impulse was to say this right away to his
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Also, if you look at it another way, I mean, the Yosef they left in their eyes was not a hero. It was really, they had a negative feeling about him. So when he's saying I'm Yosef, you can see the flip side is you want to say I'm not the same Yosef in a sense. The Yosef that you saw, right. I'm not that. I'm now a tzaddik. Yeah, so you can look at it that way also. Does anybody have that shot or?
No. Well, you see it here. I'm sure someone says it, that you see that the second part of his speech is that he goes into action. And he says, you guys need to come here. We're going to set you up here in Mitzrayim. As if Yosef was likely planning this all before his brothers even knew. The second he saw his brothers, he sprung into action, very much forward thinking in terms of what needs to get done next to bring them down and to prepare them in the land. And we know that because of Yosef's position, Egypt was acquiring, the government was acquiring all the land from all the small little landowners. This way he had a property that was set up for them. And so the Yashav to the Eretz Goshen, you're going to live in Goshen, everything was here. So the first part of the speech is Yosef telling the brothers, don't worry. I am not angry at you at all. And many read into this, Rav Sternbach also, this is his apology, or his mechila to the brothers. He's being here, not everyone agrees, but he's being mochel to the brothers through this expression. And then he says to them, this is the plan of action, we got to start moving. We can't dwell on this. And then listen to what happens next. Yes.
So I have 2 questions. First of all,
yeah.
If this is mechila, we won't meet on Yom Kippur what happened, because they point to this, that Yosef really never hesitated. We gave them what will be big rabbis, whether they will die. If we did,
Just because somebody forgave somebody else doesn't mean that they don't get like punishment. Like we don't.
Man to man.
If you're in the court of law and somebody makes a big mistake, they kidnap somebody, but they apologize, we still don't.
They're not gonna get arrested. They don't press charges. The other thing
Yeah.
was, we were about on Sunday, and
Yeah.
he said the reason that Yosef did not say anything because he wanted to see if his dreams would come true or not. But why did it take 2 years? He said a 2-year period. That's very prolonged.
He was waiting.
He was thinking to save the suffering for us. He saw this happening, why couldn't he make it happen faster instead of the 2 years?
He was waiting for them to come back. They weren't there. That's number one. Number two, not everyone agrees to that approach. That's Ramban's approach. Others say it was about tshuva. And for him, they didn't do full tshuva until Yehuda said, I have taken personal responsibility. It's only at that moment, like, follow the Chumash. And when does Yosef, when is it that moment where Yosef like, I had this, like he got too emotional where he had to say, it was at that moment where he's like, I am going to take responsibility, arrest me instead. Arrest me instead, because I have taken, whoa, arrest me. You didn't do that. Oh, things changed. Right? That's the Barbanel and that's Rav Hirsch. They have this approach in terms of the that idea. Right before they're about to leave, Yosef and Binyamin embrace. Right? And this parsha to me, I've been thinking about on Tuesday night, Bris Avraham hosted a few families of the hostages. One mother came, she lives in New York, and her daughter lives in Israel and was murdered on Simchas Torah, along with a few family members, cousin, sister of different hostages, and they shared their stories. And I felt it was very much in the parsha of reunions and coming back together. You think about what that moment was for the 100+ hostages that already returned, and please God, the rest should return very, very soon. But we see here, there are two different reunions that we see here that are much more emotional. There's a whole reunion here, Yosef now and the 11 brothers. But if you hyper-focus it on Yosef and Binyamin, like what happens here in this reunion? Vayipol al tzavarei Binyamin achiv, vayefk. He falls on the necks of Binyamin, his brother, vayefk, and he cries. How many times does Yosef cry in all of Sefer Bereshis? 8 times. 8 times. A lot of crying. Uvinyamin bacha al tzavarav, and Binyamin cries on his neck. Necks and neck, okay? And they cry. That's how you usually, if you're crying on somebody's neck. We say today in modern English, shoulder. You're crying your shoulder. But in the Torah, the word, that I guess euphemistically, that's the way it is used. But I was curious about that language. That language itself, I'm crying on your neck. Why is it that way? Why is it not a different way? Just to add to this, right after this happens, Vayinashek l'chol achav, he kisses each brother, Vayefk aleihem, and he cries on them, not on their shoulder. He cries on them. V'acharechein dibru achiv ito, and the brothers also speak to him. Right? What does that mean? They spoke to him. They still were not convinced, according to Rashi, that he was actually genuine about everything that he said. But after he saw that he was still emotional at this time, they spoke to him b'leiv shalom. They were able to feel safe or comfortable to talk to him. And now everybody hears about this. Rashi tells us, what is this whole thing with the necks? Rashi says, Vayipol al tzavarei Binyamin achiv. Yosef cries on the necks of Binyamin. Al shtei mikdasho she'asitim liyos bechalko she'Binyamin. The Beis HaMikdash was in the chelak of Yehuda and Binyamin, and he cries over the 2 Batei Mikdash that will be destroyed in Binyamin's territory. Binyamin cries on Yosef's neck in singular. What is that referring to? Mishkan Shiloh. The Mishkan Shiloh, which we've been learning about or have learned about in Shmuel Aleph, was in Shiloh for 369 years, ultimately was destroyed. So Yosef is crying on his neck. Does that bother anybody here?
Was the Mishkan destroyed? Just taken apart?
It was completely destroyed. It's not mentioned in it's mentioned in Divrei Yamim, it's not mentioned in Shmuel Aleph. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems to be so undramatic. Like, this is a very special moment. And why is Rashi using this like midrashic interpretation when they were crying? It was like, this was emotional. He was most worried about Binyamin. Binyamin did not have an older brother for so many years. We're going to learn that Binyamin named all of his children after the death of Yosef. This is tragic. So says Rabbi Menachem ben Zion Zaks, I think it's a really beautiful shot. If you think about it, Yosef is crying over Binyamin's plight, and Binyamin's crying over Yosef's plight. Right? They're not crying over their own territory or their own things. They're crying over somebody else's stuff. Nifla Ladash, Yosef lo bachal chorban shalo. He's crying over Binyamin's chorban, and Binyamin's crying over Yosef's chorban. And he says, not only that, what's fascinating is that because Mishkan Shiloh was destroyed, what were they able to build? The Beis Hamikdash in Binyamin's territory. Meaning, this is good news for Binyamin that the Shiloh was destroyed. In the long run, it was good news. What do you see here? He says, you see here the midos and the emotions of Anashim Gedolim Udegulim. Very special people are Doagim Ubochim Haim Harbe Yoser ala Purano Shalachim. They don't worry about their own issues. They're concerned more about somebody else's issues. And maybe what Rashi means here is that he is highlighting that this brotherly relationship is really brotherly love. They're more concerned about how was Binyamin feeling this whole time. And Yosef's and Binyamin's feeling, oh my gosh, not I lost a brother for 22 years, but Yosef was all alone, never. That's so sad. And they are thinking about how hard it is for them. And they're thinking how it is for them. And that is what's happening in this episode. Maybe that's the amkus of Rashi over here. I just saw that Yosaim LaTorah writes, Rav Sorotskin writes, what does the neck symbolize? Like, why is it the neck, not the shoulders? What does that symbolize? So he says that what do we put around our neck? Jewelry, right? We put heavy things or different things around our neck, usually, right? Whether it's jewelry or slaves, they put things around their neck. You put burdens, things that you can carry, heavy things that you want to carry, usually put around your neck, and it eases the burden. It eases the burden. And he says that is why the symbolism of crying on the neck is used in the Torah, because it shows how much they were in pain and how much they were carrying a tremendous amount of suffering this entire time. That highlights, exacerbates the point when Yosef cries with his other brothers, he doesn't cry on their neck. Maybe he physically does, but it's not the same. The burden of crying with them is not the same as when Yosef embraces Binyamin and when Yosef embraces Yaakov. It's fundamentally different. So that symbolism is very, very powerful over here.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I just kind of Google what's the
Now you and my high school students are the same. You're Googling while I'm teaching. Go ahead. Yeah.
Its primary function is to
They don't have their phones while I'm
Is
teaching.
to support the skull while still allowing for movement. It is the most flexible part of the spine. This flexibility allows for large movements to scan our surroundings. Most sensory inputs occur at the head. Thus, proper neck movement is vital to survival.
So the neck is what? Put it in one sentence. What is the neck?
Essential.
Neck's essential.
Right.
So,
Essential part. It's a vital part to survive. That's what.
right. So the pasuk in Shiur HaShirim compares the neck to the base of Mikdash. That's interesting. So what is that? Either that's about the burdens, the sufferings. That's a place where Klal Yisrael can bring their emotions. The Maharal says that the neck represents, what does the neck do? It connects the head, intellect, to the emotions, head to the body. So the Beis Hamikdash connects Hashem to the Jewish people.
And you also said it's flexible.
It's flexible. Yeah, it's good. That's a good word. Flexible. Very good to be flexible. We all need flexibility. It's probably the top 5 midos that you need for a good relationship, a good marriage, to be a great parent, a good friend is flexibility. It is so important, right? It's so important to be flexible. Yeah.
Wasn't there like a minute that he felt very bad thinking to try to find him? There had to be something going through his head, like, how did I leave him there? Like,
Yeah.
no,
I hear.
it's all powerful. So much power.
Yeah.
He could have tried to
Why didn't he just get Binyamin? Yeah. To be honest, like, yeah, I hear you.
He's trying. They came in separate gates trying to. True.
And he knew how to affect his father.
Yeah, we've spoken about why didn't he find his father? Why was that? Why did he overlook that? Okay, now let's go to Yosef and Yaakov and this reunion. So Yaakov, sorry, 2 points here. One is that Yaakov originally, the brothers go down, they run down to Yosef. They run down to him. They go back to Yaakov, and they say to Yaakov, by the way, Yosef is still alive. Vayegidu lo lemor, od Yosef chai, v'chihu Moshe b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Yosef's still alive, and you're never gonna believe it. Like that guy, Yosef. Okay. Vayafag libo. Vayafag libo, what does that mean? He had a heart attack. His heart skipped a beat. The Rishonim are saying, Ki lo hamin lahem. He didn't believe them. I wouldn't believe them. Like, how can this be? Vayidabru elav is kol divra Yosef asher diber aleinu. And then he says everything that Yosef said to them. This is a major machlokas, what this means. Rashi says, he said, they told him, the brothers now confess to Yaakov everything that happened. That's what Rashi says.
They didn't tell him that.
According to Rashi, they told him everything. They sold him everything, and then Yaakov was able to understand. The Ramban says, no, they just told him everything that happened recently. Good. Vayaris agalos, he sees wagons that Yosef sent. Vatechi ruach Yaakov avihim. And then Yaakov was revitalized. Something within the agalos was the sign. Vayomer Yisrael. Now, not Yaakov says, but Yisrael says, Rav od Yosef b'ni chai. Elcha ve'arenu b'terem amos. Rav, my son Yosef is still alive. Let me go and see him before I die. Okay. What is the message of the agalos? So I think that the typical Rashi says here is that the agalos represent the last thing that the Yaakov and Yosef learned, Egla Rufa, and you can why was that a message? And in previous years, we discussed the message and the meaning of Egla Rufa, no man should ever be left behind. That's what happened here. And he knows that's a sign of the two of them. Others say that what is the message of the Agalos? It represents, one second, writes something very, very different. He writes the following. He writes, Agalos is wagons. That's Balitosis, right? It's wagons. It's not Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa is a calf. So what is the meaning here? It's a reference to the Agalos that the Nisim used to bring their korbanos. We just are coming off of Hanukkah, in which the Nisim brought their korbanos each and every day. They brought them on wagons. They brought them on wagons to bring their korbanos. How many wagons did they bring? The 12 Nisim. So how many wagons did they bring? The setup, not 12. They brought 6. They brought 6. 2 per person. One for 2. One for every 2 people. And what's the message here? The message here is that brothers can work together. Brothers can work together. Again, each then, you could even add to this, the brothers all brought the same korbanos. It didn't matter at that point. There was no jealousy, no one-upmanship. Everyone, and they teamed up together. So Yossi is telling Yaakov, this will happen in the future. Your hope for brothers getting along together and not fighting is going to happen. Now listen to this. Vayidabru elav. So Yaakov says, Rav od Yosef b'nichai. Which word sticks out to you as very strange? Word Rav is like sticks out like a sore thumb. Rashi says here, Rav li od simcha v'chedva. Now I have more simcha in my life that Yosef is still alive. Says, I saw this here. I have a great sefer. You have a lot of fun every Shabbos. They just came out with the Varim also. Otzer plus a Torah, 5 volumes. It's wild midrashim and different opinions in Rishonim, halacha, hashkafa, machshav. It's very, very fascinating. He says here, what does the word Rav mean? What does it mean? Rav od Yosef b'nichai. He says that there's one person in Bereshis that is associated with the word Rav. Who is that? Right. So when Rivka has that prophecy about the 2 brothers, what does she say? Rav Yavod Sa'ir. The one with Rav is going to overwhelm the Sa'ir, the younger one. And when Vayishlach, when they met up, Yaakov says, I have everything. Yeshli Kol. What does Yaakov? What does Esau say? Yeshli Rav. I have a lot, because he always wants more. So the name Rav, the word Rav was a nickname for Esau. So once Yosef was proclaimed dead, right? The evidence, whatever it was, he decided he would come back 20 years. Esau had a party. Why did Esau have a party? Because he knew that the only person that could destroy Esau is Yosef. So what's his reaction? Rav, Esau, you're dead wrong, right? Oda, Yosef is still alive. That's a great, right? Rav. Whether he's actually, this is from the Trumas Adeshan, one of the Rishonim, really a halachic Rishon, one of the Rishonim says is Rav od Yosef b'nichai. Yosef is still alive. You still have your enemy still here, is going to destroy you. Don't think that things are going to change anytime soon. Okay? And then they eventually meet up. Vayasor Yosef Merkavto, Layal Likras Yisrael Aviv, Goshna. They go towards Goshen, and Yosef is going to meet up with them, the whole entourage. Yaakov has 70 people with him. Yosef, I'm sure, has an entourage too. Vayera Elav, he appears to him. Vayipol al tzavarav, he cries on his necks. Vayefk. Vayefk is in singular, right? Al tzavarav od. Vayefk. He cries. So who cries? Who's crying here? Torah says one of them is crying. Rashi says that who is crying? Yosef is crying, and Yaakov is not. Yaakov is saying Kriyat Shema at this point. Okay, Yaakov is saying Shema at this point. Why? So some explain that Yaakov was more intellectual. Rachel, his wife, was more emotional. Yosef and Binyamin got the emotions from their mom. And his way of reacting to Yosef was not necessarily through crying, it was through a proclamation of emunah, of saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Ramban says that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. How could it be that a father who hasn't seen his son in 22 years not shed a tear? Okay, so Rashi could say that he wasn't crying as much as Yosef. Okay, could be. The Ramban says that Yosef was finished crying. He was crying too much. He had no tears left in his body. I don't know if that's physically true. Honey will Google that in a second. And but it was Yaakov that was crying, and Yosef was the one that was not, because he just he couldn't cry anymore. So different approaches to what exactly was happening. I think a very important, very practical message is that people react differently to very emotional situations. That just because somebody is not crying doesn't mean they don't feel and they don't know what is going on, or they're not happy or sad as to the events that are occurring. Yeah.
So you're saying here that Yaakov was crying. You also see Abraham cry, Sarah died. Was he crying?
Vayevo Avram lispod l'Sara v'lifkosa. Yeah.
Did Yitzchak ever cry?
I don't know. You see Yitzchak crying? It's not clear that Avram was crying. It's not there. The pasuk was like he wanted to elicit cries, or he cried a little bit. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, a little bit. Emotions are good. Yeah.
What do you call when you cry?
Yeah.
Maybe hear Yaakov cry. My question is, did you ever see any pasuk that says anything about it?
I don't think so, but if someone's listening to the recording, let us know. Yeah. Yeah. Not sure. Yeah. Do we see anyone crying after? I was thinking about this also. Do you see anyone crying after Bereshis? The Jewish people are tortured. No, do we see any crying? I'm not sure. Do we see any crying? I'm sure it's somewhere in Mitzrayim. I think. Must be, right? If it isn't, it would be.
It says you never run out of tears.
You never run out of tears. Okay.
For 1 year, 30 gallons of tears.
Wow. Now, think about just the last 70 plus days, right? Wow. Okay, so just to review, we began with talking about Vayigash, that Shoresh of Gash, Gesher, Goshen comes up a lot, two things that don't belong together. We discussed the reveal of Yosef and what does it mean. He said twice, I'm your brother. The second time was that sold you to slavery. We had David Heiser's understanding of it, and then we had Sforno and many others. They cried on their shoulders. What did that mean? What does the shoulder mean? The shoulders, the neck. What does it that represent? What does Rashi, the deeper meaning of Rashi, really mean? Brothers cry for each other's pain, not for their own. And the reunion with Yaakov and Yosef. What was the meaning of that reunion? Wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos, and Bezrat Hashem, the schus of us learning about all of these reunions. May we hear, so very, very soon, where we actually see with our own eyes the reunions of all the hostages with the families, and may all the chayalim have the necessity to return home safely very, very soon.
Amen. The subject